Have you ever been in an explosive relationship, going from feeling adored to being criticized and like nothing you do is ever good enough? This unsettling experience could be an indication of a phenomenon known as trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is a complex and often misunderstood concept, so let's break it down a bit. Imagine attaching to someone who causes you harm. This attachment, often mistaken for feelings of passion or closeness, is what we refer to as a trauma bond. It's characterized by abuse, where the abuser employs manipulative tactics to maintain control. This abuse can take many forms, be it emotional, physical, sexual, domestic, financial, and even cultural. The concept of trauma bonding originates from the psychological phenomenon known as Stockholm Syndrome. This syndrome explains why hostages might develop a psychological attachment to their captors, even sympathizing with their goals and opposing the actions of the police. Similarly, trauma bonds can explain why some individuals remain in abusive relationships despite the harm they endure. The development of a trauma bond often begins with a roller coaster of intoxicating emotions, setting the stage for a deep emotional connection. This connection typically starts with a manipulative tactic known as love bombing. Love bombing involves an excessive display of affection from one person to another, with the intention of gaining control over them. This can manifest as constant compliments, excessive attention, gushy social media posts, and a push for commitment early in the relationship. These intense feelings of adoration and what seems like love can be incredibly intoxicating. However, they are often alternated with neglect, disapproval, abuse, and abandonment. This emotional whiplash can link back to deep-seated childhood experiences where the child will do whatever it takes to stay connected to a parent, even if that connection is harmful. Understanding trauma bonding can help us make sense of why we or others may stay in harmful relationships and how we can begin the process of breaking free. As we delve deeper into this topic, we'll explore the stages of trauma bonding, shedding light on why they can occur and why they are so difficult to leave. Trauma bonds often start with a stage called love bombing. This is the initial phase where the person who will eventually cause harm showers the other with affection, attention, and adoration. It's a whirlwind of romance and passion, where the soon-to-be abuser goes out of their way to make their partner feel special and loved. This is not typical affection, though. It's excessive, over the top, and often feels too good to be true. The love bomber may use constant compliments, grand gestures, and an overwhelming amount of sexual attention to make the other person feel like they're on top of the world. They might make gushy social media posts or express their love in ways that seem overly passionate or intense. They may also push for a serious commitment early on, creating a sense of urgency or intensity in the relationship that feels intoxicating. But this is a calculated move. It's a form of manipulation designed to gain control over the other person. The love bomber is creating a dynamic where they are the center of the other person's world. They're setting up a situation where their partner is heavily invested in the relationship and emotionally dependent on them. This stage can be confusing and disorienting for the person on the receiving end of the love bombing. It can feel like a fairy tale, like they found their soulmate. However, it's important to remember that this is not healthy behavior. It's a tactic used to create a power imbalance in the relationship and to set the stage for future manipulation and control. The love bombing phase is a critical part of establishing a trauma bond. It creates a strong emotional attachment and a sense of dependency. It also sets up a cycle of highs and lows where the person being love bombed is made to feel special and loved, only to later be subjected to criticism, neglect, abuse, and even ending the relationship only to start it again, gaining more power to create pain at a later date. The love bombing phase sets the stage for the roller coaster of emotions that characterizes trauma bonding. It's the first step in a cycle that can be difficult to break free from, especially when the person being love bombed is unaware of what's happening. After the love bombing phase, the relationship progresses towards trust and dependency. It's a stage where everything feels so right that you can't help but get hooked. It's like you're living in a bubble where nothing or no one else matters. All you can think about is them. You want to spend every waking moment with them. Their presence becomes your safe haven, the source of your happiness, and a testament of love. But here's the catch. It's not just about the time you spend together, it's about the emotional investment you're making. You're not just spending time with them, you're starting to depend on them, you're relying on them for validation, for approval, for love. You're giving them the power to dictate your worth, your happiness, and your sense of self. This shift in dynamics is subtle yet powerful. It's like a silent contract being signed, where you're handing over control without even realizing it. And they, in turn, are testing you. They're gauging how far they can push, how much they can control. They're assessing if you're all in, because once you're in, there's no easy way out. It's worse if they are non-empathic narcissists. And as this dependency deepens, so does the bond. The bond that was once rooted in passion and adoration now becomes a bond rooted in need, a need for their approval, their love, their presence. It's a bond that ties you to them, a bond that makes it harder for you to leave, even when things start to go south. This stage is where you start to lose yourself in the relationship. You start to forget who you were before them, what you loved, what made you happy. You start to morph into a version of yourself that fits their narrative, their needs, their wants. And as you lose sight of your own identity, you become more entangled in the trauma bond, making it harder to leave, harder to break free. This stage is where the victim starts to lose themselves in the relationship, making it harder to trust the reality of the relationship. As the relationship continues, the abuser begins to criticize and gaslight the victim. This is where the darker side of trauma bonds truly reveals itself, and the relationship takes a turn for the worse. In the criticism stage, the abuser starts to find fault in almost everything the victim does. The once adoring partner begins to nitpick, belittle, and demean. It could be about the victim's habits or even their friends and family. The victim might start to question their worth, their choices, and their very sense of self. The abuser, meanwhile, thrives on this self-doubt, using it to maintain control and keep the victim off balance. The criticism often starts subtly, almost imperceptibly. It might even be disguised as concern or constructive feedback. But as the relationship progresses, the criticism becomes more overt, more frequent, and more hurtful. The victim, already deeply enmeshed in the trauma bond, might even start to believe the abuser's words, accepting the blame and trying harder to please the abuser. Then comes gaslighting, a manipulative tactic that further solidifies the trauma bond. Gaslighting is a psychological trick where the abuser denies their harmful actions, twists the truth, and makes the victim question their reality. For instance, the abuser might deny saying hurtful things or blame the victim for their own abusive behavior. This mental manipulation can be so effective that the victim might start to believe they are the problem, not the abuser. These tactics of criticism and gaslighting are not random acts of cruelty. They are calculated moves designed to break down the victim's self-esteem, distort their perception of reality, and make them more susceptible to the abuser's control. The abuser uses these tactics to create a sense of confusion, self-doubt, and fear in the victim, making it harder for them to recognize the abuse and even harder for them to leave the relationship. These tactics serve to further entrench the victim in the trauma bond, making it even more difficult to leave, or maybe you split up and then stupidly go back to them. Now more than ever, the victim needs support and understanding to break free from the trauma bond and reclaim their life. The final stage of a trauma bond is resignation. This stage is marked by a deep sense of exhaustion and surrender. The victim, after being subjected to a whirlwind of toxic emotions and manipulative tactics, begins to feel trapped within the confines of the relationship. The constant cycle of love bombing, criticism, and gaslighting can be emotionally draining, leading to a point where the victim may feel it's easier to accept and endure the abuse rather than challenge it. Imagine trying to swim against a powerful current. At first you fight, you struggle, you try to make your way to the shore. But after a while, the force of the current, the relentless pull, becomes too much. You grow tired, your energy depletes, and you find yourself giving in, letting the current carry you. This is what resignation feels like in a trauma bond. It's a state of despair, a surrender to the abusive cycle, often driven by a belief that there's no escape. The abuser, sensing this resignation, may double down on their control tactics. They may isolate the victim further, cut them off from their support systems, making the victim believe that they are alone in their struggle. This isolation can intensify feelings of resignation, making the victim feel helpless and stuck. But remember, even in this stage of resignation, there is always hope. No matter how isolated or trapped a person may feel, there are always avenues for help and support. Numerous organizations and professionals specialize in providing assistance to those caught in trauma bonds, helping them reclaim their freedom and regain their sense of self. Resignation is not the end of the story. It's a dark chapter, yes, but it's not the conclusion. It's an indication that it's time to reach out, to seek help, to break free. It's a sign that the person caught in the trauma bond needs support, understanding, and most importantly, a safe exit strategy. At this stage, the victim may feel like there is no way out, but there is always hope and help available. Breaking free from a trauma bond is not easy, but it is possible. It requires a strong will, self-awareness, and a commitment to your own well-being. Get out whilst you can and learn to avoid narcissistic trauma bond red flags. Once you've learnt, it's easier to avoid in the future. This can be the hardest part, as it requires confronting the painful reality of the situation. You're not in a healthy relationship, but rather in a harmful cycle of abuse. Once you've acknowledged the trauma bond, the next step is to seek professional help. A therapist or counselor who specializes in trauma and abusive relationships can be a lifeline in your journey to break free. They can provide you with the tools and strategies you need to sever the bond and start healing. Do not be afraid or ashamed to reach out for help. There are also organizations that specialize in assisting individuals in abusive relationships. Building a strong support network is another crucial step. Reach out to friends and family and let them know what you're going through. They can provide emotional support, encouragement, and a safe space to express your feelings. Joining a support group can also be beneficial. Sharing your experiences with others who have been in similar situations can be incredibly validating and empowering. Remember, breaking free from a trauma bond is a process, not an event. It takes time and patience. There will be moments of doubt and temptation to return to the familiar, even if it's harmful. But hold on to the knowledge that you deserve better. You deserve a relationship that is built on mutual respect, love, and care. Finally, practice self-care. Engage in activities that bring you joy and fulfillment. Nourish your body, mind, and soul. This is a time for healing and rediscovery. As you break free from the trauma bond, you're also breaking free from the person you were in the relationship. You're becoming a stronger, more self-aware version of yourself. Remember, it's not your fault and you're not alone. There is help and hope for a better future. Let's recap what we've learned about trauma bonds. In the beginning, we unraveled the concept of trauma bonding, a situation where one develops an attachment to a person causing them harm. This is often characterized by a cycle of abuse and manipulation, which can take many forms such as emotional, physical, sexual, domestic, financial, or cultural. Trauma bonds can easily be mistaken for feelings of passion or closeness, making them particularly insidious. We then delved into the genesis of trauma bonds, where the perpetrator often uses a tactic known as love bombing. This manipulative strategy involves showering the victim with excessive affection and attention as a way to gain control over them. The bond is often cemented during the trust and dependency stage, where the victim becomes emotionally reliant on the abuser. The relationship then takes a dark turn as the abuser starts to introduce criticism and gaslighting. The victim is made to feel inadequate and begins to question their own perception of reality. This stage is particularly damaging as it erodes the victim's self-esteem and sense of self-worth. In the final stage, resignation, the victim feels trapped and powerless to change their situation. They've tried setting boundaries and challenging the abuser's behavior, but it only leaves them feeling exhausted and defeated. We also explored how to break free from trauma bonds. It's crucial to recognize the signs of such a bond and seek help. This could involve therapy, support from loved ones, or even legal intervention. Remember, it's never too late to break free from a trauma bond and move towards a healthier, happier future. Understanding trauma bonds is the first step in breaking free and moving towards a healthier, happier future. It's a journey that may be challenging, but it's a journey worth taking for the sake of your well-being. After all, everyone deserves a relationship that is built on respect, love, and mutual understanding, free from manipulation and control.